3:45 p.m. The explosion tore through downtown Millbrook like the hand of God
Keep
reaching
moving, it's
down
not
to
safe here!
crush steel and
Almost
glass.
there, don't stop!
The Westfield Industries Tower,
Listen
10
in,
stories
we have
of
to keep
concrete,
moving. The
ambition,
fire is spreading
and
fast.
quarterly
We can't
earnings,
stop now.
shuttered
Stay
once, twice, then began its violent collapse into chaos. Windows shattered outward in glittering cascades, metal screamed, smoke poured from every floor, black and thick, carrying the acrid smell of burning insulation and melting plastic. People ran. Office workers in ties and heels, maintenance crews in coveralls, executives clutching leather briefcases, all of them flooding into the streets, their screams blending into a single note of terror that echoed off the surrounding buildings. All except one man. Marcus Cole ran toward the tower, his work boots hammered against the asphalt, each step taking him closer to the inferno while everyone else fled. Burning debris rained down around him, chunks of drywall, twisted metal, glass that had turned molten at the edges. He raised one arm to shield his face, the other clutching the toolbox he'd grabbed from his truck without thinking. His coveralls were already dotted with ash. The sirens were coming. Still blocks away, their urgent wails cutting through the afternoon air like questions nobody could answer. Why would anyone run toward this? Why would a man, an ordinary electrician with calloused hands and a faded work shirt, race into a collapsing building that even professionals would hesitate to enter? The answer lay in what had happened 8 hours earlier, in the moments and choices that had led Marcus Cole to this impossible decision, in the cruelty of a woman he'd met that morning in a basement that now might be his tomb. But first, the beginning. The quiet desperation of a life built on pride and held together with electrical tape. 8 hours earlier, 6:30 a.m. Marcus's phone alarm cut through the darkness with its cheap electronic chirp. He silenced it on the first ring, a habit from the hospital years when Sarah needed sleep more than he needed dreams. His hand moved automatically to the nightstand, fingers finding the watch before his eyes were fully open. Sarah's watch. The leather band cracked at the edges, the silver case tarnished in places he'd never been able to polish clean. He strapped it to his wrist the way other men might cross themselves before starting the day. A ritual. A promise kept. 6:32 a.m., the watch face read. Still running slow. Had been for months now, losing 2 minutes every day. He knew how to fix it, had the tools, had watched enough YouTube videos to walk through the repair blind. But he couldn't bring himself to open the case. Some things were meant to stay broken. Sacred wounds you carried instead of healed. The apartment was small. Not cozy small, not charming small, just poor small. 2 bedrooms in a building that had been old when Marcus was born, in a neighborhood that used to be working class and was now just working. The kind of place where the elevator worked 3 days out of 7 and the superintendent fixed things with duct tape and prayer. Marcus moved through the dim light toward the kitchen, his bare feet knowing which boards creaked and avoiding them. Isaiah needed sleep. The boy had been up late again last night, wheezing despite the inhaler, that wet sound in his chest that made Marcus's own lungs ache in sympathy. The kitchen table was half covered in bills, red letters on most of them, past due in bold font that seemed to get bigger every week. Electric, $340. Water, $180. The Pediatric Cardiology Center, $47,000. A number so large it had stopped feeling real months ago. Just another lie Marcus told himself, that somehow, someday, he'd find a way to pay it down. He opened the refrigerator. A gallon of milk with maybe 2 cups left. A pack of bread. Peanut butter. No jelly, they'd run out 3 days ago, and grocery money wouldn't come until Friday. If Mrs. Henderson's wiring job paid on time, if the check didn't bounce, if the universe decided to cut Marcus Cole a break for once in his 38 years, he made Isaiah's lunch on autopilot. Peanut butter sandwich on day-old bread, folded into wax paper his son would bring home to reuse tomorrow. An apple from the discount bin, bruised on one side but still good if you didn't look too close. a juice box from the value pack at the dollar store. The watch ticked on his wrist. Steady. Perfect rhythm, even if the time was wrong. That was the thing about Sarah's watch. The mechanism worked flawlessly. It was the world that moved too fast, leaving it behind. Isaiah appeared in the doorway at 6:47, 8 years old, small for his age, with Sarah's eyes, that particular shade of brown that looked gold when the light hit right. He was already dressed for school, his shirt buttoned wrong, his shoes on the wrong feet. Marcus didn't correct him. The boy would figure it out, and the struggle was part of learning. Sarah had taught him that. Isaiah, baby, we can't solve every problem for him. He needs to know he's capable. That's what she'd said, near the end, when the cancer had eaten away everything but her voice and her wisdom. When all Marcus could do was hold her hand and promise he'd remember. Morning, Dad. Isaiah's voice still had sleep in it. He climbed into his chair, the one that wobbled, the one Marcus kept meaning to fix, and reached for the cereal box. Morning, son. They didn't talk about the milk running low. Didn't talk about how the cereal looked sad in the bowl with barely enough liquid to cover it. Isaiah ate without complaint, and Marcus watched him, memorizing the moment. The way the morning light caught the boy's profile, the concentration on his face as he chewed, the small grace of a child who'd learned too young not to ask for things they couldn't afford. Isaiah's backpack sat by the door, held together with safety pins where the zipper had broken. Inside, 3 notebooks, 2 pencils worn down to nubs, and a folder full of drawings. The boy had his mother's talent, could sketch anything, buildings, people, dreams. Last week he'd drawn the Riverside Elementary playground with such detail, Marcus could count the chains on the swings. Dad? Isaiah looked up, cereal spoon halfway to his mouth. Mom's watch is still keeping good time, right? The question hit Marcus sideways. Isaiah asked it every few weeks, always with that same careful tone, like he was checking to make sure his mother's ghost was still around, still watching over them through the mechanism of steel and glass strapped to Marcus's wrist. Yes, baby. Marcus's throat tightened. It's keeping perfect time. The lie tasted bitter, but some truths were too heavy for an 8-year-old to carry. That time moved on whether you were ready or not. That watches could run slow and people could run out of chances. That Marcus checked Sarah's watch 100 times a day, not because he needed to know the hour, but because he needed to remember she'd existed at all. Isaiah nodded, satisfied, and returned to his cereal. Marcus turned away before the boy could see the water in his eyes. 6:54 a.m. Time to get moving. Isaiah's inhaler sat on the counter, nearly empty. The pharmacy had called yesterday. The refill would be $340 without insurance. With their insurance, it was still $340, because their deductible was higher than Marcus's monthly take-home. He'd stretched the current inhaler as far as it would go, telling Isaiah to use it only when absolutely necessary, knowing that absolutely necessary was a fluid concept when your son woke up gasping at 2 a.m. Don't forget this. Marcus handed over the inhaler. Isaiah took it with the weary acceptance of a child who'd been managing chronic illness since he could walk. It makes me dizzy, Dad. I know. We'll get you the new one soon. Another lie. Marcus was getting good at those. Mrs. Henderson will pick you up after school if I'm running late, okay? Okay. They walked to the bus stop together, Isaiah's small hand in Marcus's calloused one. The neighborhood was already awake, shift workers heading home, early birds heading out, the perpetual motion of people trying to survive in a city that chewed up the working class and spit out statistics. Mrs. Henderson was already outside her building, watering the flowers she kept in cracked pots along her stoop. 70 years old, white hair in tight curls, dark skin that had weathered 7 decades of Millbrook winters and kept its dignity. She'd been Sarah's friend, had brought casseroles after the funeral, still brought them sometimes, wrapped in foil with instructions Marcus never needed, because he ate them cold from the container at midnight when the grief got too loud. Morning, Marcus. Morning, baby. Morning, Mrs. Henderson. Isaiah waved. Heard something troubling yesterday. Mrs. Henderson set down her watering can, her expression shifting to the particular concern of someone about to deliver bad news. My niece works at City Hall. Says Westfield Industries is buying up the whole neighborhood. Lincoln Heights Galleria, they're calling it. Fancy shopping mall where our homes are standing. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. When? Meeting tonight, 7 p.m., Cedar Community Center. They're making it official. Mrs. Henderson's eyes found Isaiah, then flicked back to Marcus. That includes Riverside Elementary, honey. The bus arrived with a hydraulic hiss. Isaiah climbed aboard, his backpack bouncing against his small shoulders. He turned to wave from the window, and Marcus waved back, holding the smile until the bus pulled away. Then he let it drop. They can't do that. The words came out flat. Where would the kids go? To wherever people like us go, when people like them decide our land is worth more than our lives. Mrs. Henderson's voice carried no bitterness, just the tired acceptance of someone who'd seen this pattern before. But we fight anyway. Because what else we gonna do? Marcus's phone rang. Cole Electric, the business name he'd registered 3 years ago, back when he still believed hard work and fair prices would be enough. His one employee, himself, and his fleet of vehicles, a truck with 180,000 miles, and a prayer. The number on the screen was local, but unfamiliar. Cole Electric. This is Westfield Industries. We have an electrical emergency at our main building. Surge damage. Half the systems are down. Can you be here in 30 minutes? The voice was female, efficient, used to being obeyed. It's $500 for the rush job. $500. The number rewrote Marcus's morning. $500 would cover the electric bill with change left over. Would buy groceries. Would be 2/3 of Isaiah's inhaler refill. I can be there in 20. He told Mrs. Henderson he'd pick up Isaiah himself, promised to be at the community meeting that night. Then he was in his truck, fighting morning traffic toward downtown Millbrook, toward the gleaming tower where people made in a day what Marcus earned in a month. The security guard at the loading dock was a black man about Marcus's age, with the kind of build that said he'd done physical labor before graduating to watching other people do it. His name tag read, Joe. You the electrician? Joe's tone carried a warning wrapped in friendliness. Boss lady's in a mood today. Been tearing through people like a tornado since 6 a.m. Good luck in there. Appreciated. Marcus grabbed his toolbox from the truck bed. Heard this neighborhood's getting bought up. You know anything about that? Joe's expression shifted. Not quite guilty, but close. Look, man, I just work here. But yeah, Lincoln Heights project. They're serious about it. My daughter goes to Riverside Elementary. He paused. Went. Past tense, probably. The service elevator descended with a mechanical groan that reminded Marcus of his truck's transmission. The basement level was a maze of concrete corridors and humming machinery, the building's intestines, hidden from the polished lobbies above. He found the electrical panel by following the smell of burnt wiring. The damage was worse than the voice on the phone had suggested. Whole sections of the panel were scorched, circuit breakers thrown, wires that would need replacing. 3 hours minimum, maybe 4. Marcus was already mentally calculating materials costs when he heard footsteps behind him. Sharp, precise. The click of expensive heels on cheap concrete. You're the electrician. Not a question. A statement of fact. Delivered by a woman who was used to facts bending themselves to her preference. Marcus turned. Catherine Westfield looked like she'd been designed by a committee tasked with creating the visual representation of wealth and power. Mid-30s, blonde hair pulled back in a bun so severe it looked painful, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Marcus's truck. Diamond studs in her ears caught the fluorescent light and threw it back like tiny accusations. Her eyes were the color of ice, and just as warm. Yes, ma'am. Marcus kept his voice level, professional. Marcus Cole, Cole Electric. This panel's going to need 3, maybe 4 hours of work. The surge damage is extensive. I have a conference call with Goldman Sachs at 11 a.m. She cut him off, like his words were obstacles to be cleared. This building needs to be fully operational by then. Ma'am, if I don't do this right, you could have a fire. Electrical fires don't care about your schedule or your excuses. Her gaze moved past him to the exposed panel, then down to his hands. to the watch on his wrist. Marcus felt the shift in the air, the way a small animal feels the shadow of a hawk. Is that supposed to be a watch? Her voice had changed. Still cold, but now there was something else underneath, a kind of curiosity that felt predatory. She was looking at Sarah's watch the way an entomologist might examine a pinned butterfly. Interesting. Pathetic. Already dead. It belonged to my wife. The words came out harder than Marcus intended. Protective. The same tone he used when Isaiah's classmates asked why his mom never came to pick up. Past tense. Catherine tilted her head. Cancer? How did she know that? Marcus's jaw clenched. The thing Isaiah called the jaw thing, the muscle that jumped when Marcus was angry but couldn't show it. Yes. That must have been expensive. She said it casually, like she was commenting on the weather. Medical treatment? End-of-life care? Is that why you're still doing this kind of work? Because you're drowning in debt? The world seemed to narrow. The basement, the fluorescent lights, this woman in her designer suit asking questions she had no right to ask. Marcus's hand moved to cover the watch instinctively. Catherine noticed. Of course she noticed. She smiled, and it was the smile of someone who just confirmed a hypothesis. I had my people pull your credit report this morning. She said it like it was reasonable, like invading someone's financial privacy was just good business practice. Marcus Cole, $43,000 a year, $47,000 in medical debt from your wife's cancer treatment. One son, 8 years old, with asthma and a heart condition that your insurance refuses to cover. She paused. That pathetic relic on your wrist is probably worth $20 at a pawn shop. Your wife deserved better. The words hit like physical blows, each one chosen for maximum damage, delivered with surgical precision. Marcus stood frozen, his pulse hammering in his ears, the watch suddenly heavy on his wrist. Did you know your son attends Riverside Elementary? The question came soft, almost gentle, which made it worse. Why would you know that? Marcus's voice was barely controlled now, a thread pulled tight, ready to snap. Because I make it my business to know who I'm dealing with. Catherine stepped closer, and Marcus could smell her perfume, something expensive that probably had a French name. Your son's school. We're demolishing it next month. Lincoln Heights Galleria, $500 million development project. There are 300 kids at that school. Marcus heard himself say it, heard the desperation creeping in. Where are they supposed to go? Not my problem. She said it like she meant it, like 300 children's educations were line items on a spreadsheet, easily erased. Progress requires sacrifice, Mr. Cole. Some people understand that. Others spend their lives clinging to dead wives and broken dreams. Don't, Marcus wanted to say. Don't you dare talk about Sarah. But Catherine wasn't finished. That watch still ticks? She pointed at it with one manicured finger. Your son deserves better than a father who clings to ghosts. A father who's drowning in debt and self-pity. When Isaiah grows up and realizes what kind of man you really are, a man who chose sentiment over his child's future, he's going to be ashamed of you. The silence that followed was so complete, Marcus could hear the electrical hum 2 floors up, could hear his own heartbeat, could hear the watch ticking, steady, perfect, faithful, marking the seconds of this moment he would remember for the rest of his life. Get out. He whispered it, didn't trust himself to say it louder. Get out of this basement. Catherine smiled. Not warmth, just the satisfaction of someone who'd landed every punch exactly where they'd aimed. Finish the work, Mr. Cole. She turned toward the stairs, her heels clicking that same precise rhythm. And try not to let your personal problems affect the quality. I'd hate to have to find someone more competent. She disappeared up the stairs. The sound of her departure echoed in the concrete space, each footstep like a nail being driven into a coffin. Marcus stood alone for a long time. Just him and the broken electrical panel and the watch on his wrist, and the rage building in his chest like water behind a dam. He thought about Sarah, about the promises he'd made at her bedside. Promise number 1, take care of Isaiah. He's your North Star. Promise number 3. Love again. Not right away, but someday. 3 promises, and he was failing all of them. Couldn't afford Isaiah's medication, was so hardened by grief he'd almost punched a billionaire CEO in her own building. And love? That was so far in the rear view, it might as well have been fiction. The watch kept ticking. Marcus Juster. 4 hours later, the building's power systems were running smoothly. Marcus had traced every burnt circuit, replaced charred wiring, tested and retested until he was certain nothing would catch fire in the night. His hands were cramped, his back ached, and the $500 felt like blood money. But he needed it. Needed every dollar. So he packed his tools and took the service elevator back to the ground floor, hoping to collect his payment and disappear before Catherine Ashford crossed his path again. The lobby of Westfield Industries was everything the basement wasn't. Soaring ceilings, marble floors, glass walls that turned the afternoon sun into cathedral light. People in expensive suits moved with purpose, their footsteps creating a symphony of importance and urgency. Marcus felt out of place in his work clothes, like a smudge of reality on an otherwise perfect picture. Catherine emerged from the main elevator surrounded by assistants and lawyers, all of them moving in formation like a military unit. She was on her phone, speaking in rapid-fire sentences about market positions and quarterly projections. Her voice carried the kind of authority that could move millions with a single word. The Lincoln Heights project is greenlit. She was saying it loud enough for half the lobby to hear. Demolition starts next month. The elementary school, the community center, the whole neighborhood. It's all coming down. She paused, listening to whoever was on the other end. Then she laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Collateral damage. Her eyes scanned the lobby and landed on Marcus, standing near the security desk. She held his gaze as she continued. Some people just don't understand that sentiment doesn't pay the bills. They cling to the past instead of embracing the future. The message was clear, pointed, cruel. Marcus watched her disappear through the revolving doors into a sleek black town car, watched the car pull away from the curb and merge into traffic, watched until it was just another vehicle in the river of steel and glass that was downtown Millbrook. Joe appeared beside him with a payment slip and an envelope. Got your $500 right here. Joe handed it over, then lowered his voice. What she said up there? About the neighborhood? It's real, man. Whole thing's been sold. Westfield Industries is turning it into some fancy shopping complex. Lincoln Heights Galleria, they're calling it. What about the people who live there? Marcus heard himself ask, even though he already knew the answer. Had known it since Mrs. Henderson's warning this morning. Not Westfield's problem, apparently. Joe's expression was heavy with resignation. There's relocation compensation, but it's a joke. Wouldn't cover first and last month's rent in this market. Marcus felt the rage from earlier rekindling. This can't be legal. There must be zoning laws, community protections, all taken care of. Joe glanced around, making sure no other security guards were listening. Word is, Westfield's got half the city council in their pocket. The other half's too scared to stand up to them. Marcus left the building with $500 in his pocket and a fury in his chest that felt like it might crack his ribs. He drove aimlessly through Millbrook, past the small houses and corner stores that made up the neighborhood, trying to process what he'd learned. Everywhere he looked, he saw memories. The bodega where Sarah bought her coffee every morning. The park where they'd taken Isaiah for his 3rd birthday, before the diagnosis, when life still felt possible. The intersection where she'd told him she was pregnant, both of them standing in the rain, laughing like idiots. This was his world, their world. The life he and Sarah had built together, brick by brick, paycheck to paycheck. And Catherine Westfield was going to bulldoze it for a shopping mall. Almost without conscious decision, Marcus found himself parking outside Riverside Elementary. The building wasn't much to look at. Red brick worn by decades of weather, windows that needed replacing, a playground with equipment that had seen better years. But it was a good school, teachers who cared, programs that helped kids like Isaiah who needed art supplies they couldn't afford at home and patience they wouldn't find in the overcrowded public schools 20 miles away. Through the chain-link fence, Marcus could see children playing. Third graders, maybe fourth. Their laughter carried across the asphalt. He spotted Isaiah among them, his small frame running in a game of tag, his face lit up in a way it rarely was at home. Happy. Safe. Free. A woman approached from the school entrance. Early 30s, white, with curly brown hair and the kind of tired eyes that said she'd been teaching long enough to love it and hate it in equal measure. Her name tag read Miss Patterson. Mr. Cole? She recognized him from parent-teacher conferences. Everything okay? Just checking on Isaiah. Marcus kept his eyes on his son. Had a job finish early. Miss Patterson's smile faded. I heard the rumors. About the school. They're not rumors. Marcus's voice came out flat. It's happening. Demolition starts next month. I know. Miss Patterson looked back at the building, her expression grief-stricken. We're not supposed to discuss it with parents yet. Official announcement comes next week. But yes, it's real. 2 months, Marcus said. The timeline was clicking into place. That's not enough time for families to make arrangements. For teachers to find new positions. I know. She turned back to the children, watching them play with the intensity of someone memorizing a moment. Most of these kids don't have options, Mr. Cole. Their parents can't drive them 20 miles to the next district, can't afford private school. They'll just fall through the cracks. Marcus thought about what Catherine had said. Progress requires sacrifice. But it was never the powerful who sacrificed. Never the Catherine Westfields of the world in their designer suits and executive offices. It was always people like these children, like Isaiah, who paid the price for someone else's profit. There's a community meeting tonight. Miss Patterson pulled out her phone, showing him the flyer. 7 p.m., Cedar Community Center. Some parents are trying to organize protests, maybe legal challenges. I don't know if it'll help, but I'll be there. Miss Patterson nodded, started to turn away, then stopped. Isaiah's doing really well in art class. Did you know that? He has real talent. Like his mother. The words hit Marcus in the chest. Sarah had been an artist. Nothing professional, just sketches in notebooks, watercolors of Millbrook skyline. She'd filled their apartment with color, even when the cancer was draining everything else away. He uses her pencils, Marcus managed. The ones she left him. I know, he told me. Miss Patterson's voice was gentle. He said his mom visits him in dreams sometimes. Tells him to keep drawing. Marcus had to look away. Had to blink against the sudden water in his eyes. The recess bell rang. Children lined up, reluctant to go inside, but obedient in the way of kids who knew school was a gift, even when they didn't understand why. Isaiah spotted Marcus through the fence and waved, his whole face lighting up. Marcus waved back, kept waving, until Isaiah disappeared through the doors. Then he sat in his truck and cried for the first time since Sarah's funeral. Jester. 7 p.m. The Cedar Community Center was packed beyond capacity. 200 people crammed into a space meant for half that, with more spilling into the hallway. Parents, teachers, business owners, residents who'd lived in the neighborhood for 40 years. All of them united by the same fear, the same anger, the same desperate hope that maybe, somehow, they could stop what was coming. Marcus found a spot near the back, standing behind the last row of folding chairs. He recognized faces from around the neighborhood. The woman who ran the corner store, the man who fixed bicycles out of his garage, Diane Walker, a black woman about Marcus's age, whose daughter Mia was in Isaiah's class. At the front of the room, a middle-aged white man in a rumpled suit was speaking, his voice strained with the effort of remaining calm. Westfield Industries has secured all necessary permits. He held up a stack of papers like they were evidence in a trial. The zoning changes were approved in closed session last month. The sale is final. Demolition is scheduled to begin in 6 weeks. The room erupted. Parents shouting questions and accusations. Someone threw a paper cup. The man at the front raised his hands calling for order, but the crowd had crossed the threshold from fear into fury. Marcus watched it unfold with a strange sense of detachment. These people were fighting, and they'd already lost. Catherine Westfield had ensured their defeat before they even knew they were at war. "What about our children?" A woman in the front row stood, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Where are they supposed to go to school?" Westfield has suggested the district can provide buses to Harrison Elementary. The man looked uncomfortable even saying it. "It's about 20 miles away." 20 miles? Another parent exploded. "That's an hour each way with traffic. My kids are 6 and 8. "What about those of us who don't have cars?" Someone else called out. "How are we supposed to get to parent-teacher conferences? What if our kids get sick?" The questions kept coming, each one highlighting another aspect of the hardship, another way Westfield's plan would destroy their lives. Marcus listened, adding his own silent concerns to the growing list. Isaiah would lose the stability he desperately needed, would lose friends he'd made after Sarah's death, would lose Miss Patterson, who'd been so patient during those months when Isaiah barely spoke. After the formal meeting ended, people gathered in smaller groups, exchanging phone numbers, making plans. Marcus found himself talking with Diane and a cluster of other parents from Isaiah's class. "This is Mia's first stable school since her father left." Diane's voice was tight with controlled emotion. "She's finally making progress, finally feeling secure. And now this." Isaiah lost his mother 2 years ago. Marcus heard himself contributing. "Riverside has been our rock. Ms. Patterson especially. It's not just about inconvenience." An older white man added, his hands shaking slightly. "It's about tearing apart a community. These kids rely on each other. We carpool, we babysit, we look out for one another. You can't just pick that up and move it 20 miles away. We need to make them see us as people." Marcus's voice came out harder than he'd intended, loud enough that the nearby conversations paused. Not obstacles to remove, not problems to solve. Real people with real lives that matter. "How?" Diane looked at him with a mixture of hope and desperation. "They don't invite people like us to their boardrooms." Marcus didn't have an answer. Not yet. But as he drove home that night, Isaiah drowsing in the passenger seat after the long meeting, an idea began to form. Catherine Westfield had made this personal, had invaded Marcus's privacy, mocked Sarah's memory, threatened his son's future, had treated him as beneath her notice. Perhaps it was time to return the favor, to make this personal for her too. The thought should have felt wrong, should have triggered the better angels of Marcus's nature, the parts Sarah had loved and nurtured. But all he felt was cold certainty. Some fights were worth having, even if you might lose. Sarah had taught him that too. In the hospital, when she refused to stop fighting, even as the cancer consumed her from the inside out. When she made him promise those 3 things, her hand barely able to grip his, her voice a whisper. "Promise me you'll take care of Isaiah. Promise me you won't let grief make you hard. Promise me you'll love again." 3 promises. He touched the watch on his wrist, checking the time. 9:47 by Sarah's accounting. Probably closer to 9:49 in reality. Still running slow. Still keeping its perfect, flawed rhythm. Still reminding him that some things never truly break. They just keep ticking. 11 p.m. The knock on Marcus's apartment door made him freeze. Nobody visited this late. Nobody except Mrs. Henderson when she was worried, or the building super when something had broken, or he checked through the peephole. Catherine Westfield stood in his hallway. She looked different than she had in the basement or the lobby. Her hair was down, falling loose around her shoulders. She wore jeans, actual jeans, the kind normal people wore, and a simple blouse. No jewelry except a thin gold watch that probably cost more than Marcus's annual income. Her face was scrubbed clean of makeup, and without it she looked younger, vulnerable. Marcus opened the door, didn't speak, just waited. "Mr. Cole." Her voice was quieter than it had been in the basement, almost tentative. "I apologize for the late hour. May I come in?" She stepped past him without waiting for permission, her eyes taking in the modest apartment. The faded couch, the small television, the kitchen table still covered in bills. Her gaze lingered on a crayon drawing taped to the refrigerator, Isaiah's rendering of their family. 3 figures, Marcus, Isaiah, and a woman with wings. "Charming," Catherine said, in a tone that made the word mean its opposite. "What do you want?" Marcus kept his voice level, controlled. His hand unconsciously touched Sarah's watch. "I wanted to make something clear, since you seem determined to make a nuisance of yourself." She turned to face him, and the corporate mask was back in place. "The Lincoln Heights project is happening. The zoning is approved. The permits are issued. The financing is secured. Nothing you or any other concerned parent says at next week's public hearing is going to change that." "Then why are you here?" "Because I'm offering you a choice." Catherine moved around his living room like she was touring a museum exhibit of how poor people lived. "A simple one, really. I'm prepared to offer you a relocation package substantially more generous than what the other families will receive. $150,000. Enough to move to a better neighborhood, enroll Isaiah in a private school, perhaps even make a dent in that medical debt." The number hung in the air between them. Life-changing money. Isaiah's inhaler refills for years, the cardiac ablation surgery his doctors kept recommending, a future that didn't involve choosing between electricity and groceries. "And what would I have to do?" Marcus asked, though he already knew. "Nothing complicated." Catherine's smile was cold, professional. "Stay away from the public hearing next Tuesday. Encourage the other parents to accept the inevitable. Focus on your own family instead of some misguided attempt at community activism." She pulled an envelope from her bag, set it on the kitchen table on top of the overdue bills. Marcus could see the check inside through the translucent paper. 6 figures. More money than he'd ever seen at once. "Why me?" His voice came out hoarse. "There are hundreds of families affected, dozens of parents organizing. Why come to my apartment at 11 at night to offer me specifically a special deal?" Something flickered across Catherine's face. Uncertainty. Discomfort. It vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by her usual icy composure. "Let's just say I have a particular interest in ensuring this project proceeds smoothly." She moved toward the door. "And my sources tell me you are becoming rather vocal in your opposition. I prefer to address potential problems directly." "Your sources?" Marcus's jaw clenched. "You mean you've had someone watching me?" Catherine didn't confirm or deny. Her silence was answer enough. Marcus picked up the envelope, held it for a moment, feeling its weight. Then he set it back down on the table with deliberate care. "No." Catherine's eyebrows rose. "No? I won't be bought off." Marcus's voice was steady now, clear. "This isn't just about Isaiah or me. It's about 300 kids who need their school. About families who've lived here for generations. About lives that matter, even if they don't fit into your profit margins." For a long moment, Catherine simply looked at him, her expression unreadable. When she finally spoke, her voice had lost its professional edge. "You actually believe that?" It wasn't a question, more like a realization. Despite all evidence to the contrary, you actually think one person can make a difference. "Maybe not." Marcus met her eyes. "But I'd rather fail trying than succeed by selling out my community." Something shifted in Catherine's expression. Brief, almost imperceptible. Then the mask was back, harder than before. "Very well. I made the offer. You've rejected it. We both know where we stand." She moved to the door, then paused with her hand on the knob. Without turning around, she added, "I should warn you, Mr. Cole. If you persist in opposing this project, I will not be so generous when we next meet. Westfield Industries protects its interests thoroughly." The threat hung in the air long after she'd left. Marcus stood in the center of his small living room, the envelope still sitting on the table, the money inside representing everything he needed and nothing he could accept. He thought about Sarah, about the promises, about Isaiah sleeping in the next room, his small chest rising and falling in rhythm with the labored breath of damaged lungs. "Take care of Isaiah." Don't let grief make you hard. Love again. He'd kept the first promise every day for 3 years. Had failed spectacularly at the second. Was so hardened he'd just turned down $150,000 out of pure stubborn pride. And the third? The third was a joke. Love required trust, and Marcus trusted exactly 2 people on this earth, his son and a dead woman's ghost. The watch on his wrist kept ticking. Steady. Faithful. Wrong. Marcus checked the time. 11:34 by Sarah's measurement, probably 11:36 in reality. 2 minutes slow and falling further behind with every passing day. Some things you couldn't fix. Some wounds stayed open. Some watches ran at their own speed, marking time in a rhythm only they understood. He looked at the envelope one more time. Then he picked it up, walked to his bedroom, and put it in the drawer where he kept Sarah's things. Her wedding ring, her favorite pencils, the last birthday card she'd given him, with her handwriting getting shaky from the medication. The envelope would stay there, unopened. A reminder that some prices were too high, even when you were desperate enough to consider paying them. Tomorrow he'd go to work, would fix Mrs. Henderson's wiring for half what it was worth, would scrape together enough for Isaiah's inhaler somehow, would show up at that public hearing and say his piece, even knowing it wouldn't change anything, because Sarah had taught him that doing the right thing mattered, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. And because 3 days from now, at 3:45 p.m., an explosion would tear through the Westfield Industries Tower, and Marcus Cole would have a choice to make, the kind of choice that defines a man, that separates who you are from who circumstances try to make you. But he didn't know that yet. Right now, all he knew was the steady tick of Sarah's watch, the quiet breathing of his son in the next room, the weight of promises kept and broken in equal measure. Right now, that was enough. 3 days passed like water through cupped hands. Marcus worked his regular jobs, fixed wiring in apartments that smelled like mildew and defeat, avoided looking at the envelope in Sarah's drawer. Isaiah went to school, came home, did homework at the kitchen table while Marcus pretended the bills weren't multiplying. At night, Marcus dreamed of explosions he couldn't explain, woke in cold sweats with Sarah's watch pressed against his racing heart. On the 3rd day, a woman approached him outside Riverside Elementary. She was white, mid-30s, with straight brown hair pulled into a professional ponytail and intelligent eyes that had seen enough corruption to stop being surprised by it. Her press badge identified her as Rebecca Stone, Millbrook Gazette. She carried a manila folder like it contained state secrets. "Mr. Cole, I'm an investigative reporter. I have information about the Lincoln Heights project you need to see." Marcus's first instinct was distrust. Reporters didn't help people like him. They extracted stories, published them, moved on to the next crisis, while the subjects of their articles kept drowning. But something in Rebecca Stone's expression made him pause. She looked angry, genuinely, righteously furious. "I'm listening." She opened the folder on the hood of his truck. Inside, environmental assessment documents marked confidential, internal use only, pages of technical data that meant nothing to Marcus until Rebecca pointed to a highlighted section. Chromium levels 12 times the legal limit. Lead, arsenic, industrial solvents? Her finger traced the contamination map. This entire area was poisoned by Sterling Chemical between 1985 and 2003. The company that owned that plant belongs to Victor Sterling, who is now COO of Westfield Industries. Marcus stared at the map. The contamination zone was shaded in red, spreading like a bloodstain across the neighborhood. Its edge touched the woods behind Riverside Elementary, 200 yards from where children played during recess. They know about this. It wasn't a question. They've known for 20 years. Rebecca's voice carried the weight of someone who'd verified every fact twice. What they don't want you to know is why they're really demolishing the school. It's not about building a shopping mall. It's about burying the evidence before the contamination spreads to the playground and someone starts asking questions. Marcus's hands tightened on the folder. Isaiah's asthma. The heart condition the doctors couldn't fully explain. How many other children in this neighborhood carried similar diagnoses? How many parents had been told it was genetic, environmental factors beyond their control? Just bad luck. Why are you telling me this? Because someone needs to stop them. Rebecca met his eyes. And you're the only one asking the right questions. She left him with copies of the documents and a phone number. Marcus sat in his truck for a long time, reading technical language he barely understood, but whose implications were crystal clear. Westfield Industries wasn't just demolishing a school. They were covering up a crime that had been killing children for 2 decades. His phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Cole, this is Melanie Ward. I'm Catherine Westfield's executive assistant. Marcus's stomach tightened. How did you get this number? I need to speak with you urgently. Melanie's voice was low, almost whispering. Not about what you think. About something Ms. Westfield doesn't know I know. Can you meet me tonight? Riverside Park, the boat launch, 8 o'clock? Every instinct Marcus possessed screamed trap. But the documents in his lap said someone inside Westfield Industries had a conscience. Maybe that someone was Melanie Ward. I'll be there. He spent the afternoon researching. The Millbrook Public Library had computers and a reference librarian who helped him navigate property records, corporate filings, court documents. What he found painted a picture darker than he'd imagined. Sterling Chemical had been cited for environmental violations at 17 different facilities nationwide. Always paid the fines, never admitted wrongdoing, never cleaned up the mess. In 2003, right before selling the Millbrook property, the company had undergone a massive restructuring designed to shield assets from liability. The Millbrook parcel had been sold to something called Bluestone Development for $1. Bluestone had held it exactly 14 months before selling to the school district. Bluestone's owner, Robert Westfield, Catherine's father. Marcus read the name 3 times, making sure he understood. Catherine's father had bought contaminated land from Victor Sterling, then sold it to build an elementary school. Either Robert Westfield was monumentally stupid, or something else had been happening. Something that didn't fit the narrative of corporate greed and environmental crime. At 7:45 p.m., Marcus left Isaiah with Mrs. Henderson and drove to Riverside Park. The October evening had turned cold, the kind of chill that promised winter was coming whether you were ready or not. The boat launch was deserted except for a woman sitting on a bench, her silhouette barely visible in the dim light from a single lamppost. Not Melanie Ward. Catherine Westfield stood as Marcus approached. She wore the same casual clothes from that night at his apartment, jeans, simple blouse, hair loose. But her expression was different, open, almost frightened. Thank you for coming. Her voice lacked its usual authority. I know you have no reason to trust me. Then why am I here? Because I need to tell you something about your wife. Catherine pulled a photograph from her jacket pocket. And I need you to understand that everything I thought I knew about my father was wrong. She handed Marcus the photo. The image was 8 years old, printed on photo paper that had started to yellow at the edges. It showed a hospital room at Cedar Valley Memorial. In the bed, Robert Westfield, older, gray-haired, connected to monitors and IV lines. Standing beside him checking his chart, Sarah Cole in her nurse's uniform, her face younger but unmistakably hers. Marcus's world tilted. Your wife was my father's nurse. Catherine's words came fast, urgent. 2016, he had a massive heart attack. 2 weeks in Cedar Valley Memorial. According to his journals, Sarah changed his life. Sarah never mentioned. Marcus couldn't finish the sentence. His hands were shaking. The photograph blurred. She wouldn't have. Patient confidentiality. Catherine sat back down on the bench, suddenly looking exhausted. But my father wrote about her constantly. I found his journals last week when I was looking for something else. He wrote about conversations they had, about legacy, about what it means to be a good person when you've spent your entire life being ruthless. Marcus sat beside her, still staring at the photograph. Sarah's smile was the same one she'd given him every morning, the same one that had faded slowly as cancer consumed her. The same one Isaiah had inherited. Catherine pulled out a leather journal, opened to a page marked with a ribbon. "May I read you something?" Marcus nodded, not trusting his voice. Catherine's hands trembled slightly as she read her father's handwriting. "Nurse Sarah asked me today what legacy I'm leaving, not in money or buildings, but in the lives I've touched." I told her, profits, acquisitions, quarterly earnings that exceeded projections. I said it proudly, like a man reciting his greatest achievements. She smiled, not unkindly, but with a sadness that cut deeper than any critique. "Is that what you want engraved on your tombstone?" she asked. Robert Westfield. His shareholders were pleased. I tried to explain that business is about creating value, about growth, about beating the competition.
She listened patiently, then asked a question that has haunted me for 3 days.
"But who did you protect? Who did you make safer? Who will remember you with love instead of fear?" I had no answer. She told me about her husband, an electrician, an honest man who works 16-hour days to provide for their infant son, about dreams they share that have nothing to do with wealth, about choosing people over profit every single day, even when it costs them everything. I've been choosing wrong my entire life. I've been building monuments to my own ego, while people like Nurse Sarah's husband build families. Which of us is truly successful? Which legacy actually matters? Catherine's voice cracked on the last words. She closed the journal, held it against her chest like a shield. 3 months after his heart attack, my father bought the contaminated land from Victor Sterling. Paid market rate, which Victor thought was a miracle because everyone knew the property was toxic. Then Dad sold it to the school district at a 90% loss. Marcus's mind was racing, connecting pieces. School construction requires EPA oversight, mandatory environmental testing and cleanup. Exactly. Catherine looked at him with something like respect. My father forced a remediation without publicly exposing Victor's crimes. He protected 300 children because your wife showed him they were human beings who mattered more than profit margins. The park was silent, except for the river lapping against the boat launch. Marcus touched Sarah's watch, feeling its steady rhythm. She'd saved children she would never meet, had changed a billionaire's heart and never mentioned it, had died believing she was just a nurse doing her job. Why are you telling me this now? Because I found something else in my father's papers. Catherine's expression hardened. Evidence that Victor Sterling knows the contamination is spreading, that in 5 years, maybe 10, it will reach the school playground. He's been pushing for this development project to bury the evidence before that happens, to demolish the school and cap the contamination under concrete and shopping mall foundations. Your father tried to protect those kids, Marcus said slowly, understanding crystallizing. But Sterling is trying to kill them. And I've been helping him. Catherine's voice was barely above a whisper. I inherited this company from my father, thought I was honoring his legacy by making it profitable, by being harder, colder, more ruthless than he ever was. But I've been destroying everything he actually cared about. Marcus wanted to hate her, wanted to hold on to the rage from the basement, from her cruelty about Sarah's watch, from the threat of demolishing Isaiah's school. But looking at her now, this woman who just had her entire worldview shattered, all he felt was a strange kinship. They'd both lost people who'd made them better. They'd both been failing to honor what those people had taught them. What are we going to do about it? Catherine looked at him sharply. We? You have your father's papers. I have Rebecca Stone's environmental documents. Together, we might have enough to stop this.
Marcus stood, offering his hand. But we need proof the contamination is current, not just historical data from 20 years ago. Catherine took his hand. Her grip was firm, surprisingly calloused for a CEO. I know where we can get it. First Millbrook Bank closed at 5 p.m. At 9 p.m., Catherine used her keys to let them in through the service entrance. The building was dark except for emergency lighting, silent except for the hum of security systems. Marcus followed her through corridors he'd never see during business hours, past vault doors and safety deposit rooms, to a private viewing area in the basement. Safe deposit box 347. Catherine inserted 2 keys, one from the bank manager, one from her own keyring. My father's personal archive. Everything he didn't want stored at the company. The box was larger than Marcus expected, more of a trunk than a box. Inside, folders organized with obsessive precision, each labeled in Robert Westfield's neat handwriting. Catherine pulled out the one marked Sterling Chemical, Millbrook Site. Inside were environmental surveys dating back to 1997. Soil samples, groundwater analysis, internal Sterling Chemical memos discussing acceptable contamination levels, and long-term liability mitigation strategies. Every document painted the same picture. Victor Sterling and his company had known exactly what they were doing, had calculated the cost of cleanup versus the cost of lawsuits, and decided poisoning a neighborhood was good business. Here, Catherine pulled out a hand-drawn map. This is what my father was really worried about. The map showed contamination spread patterns over time, red zones growing like cancer, reaching toward the school. Robert had written notes in the margins. 2016, safe. 2020, borderline. 2025, playground zone compromised. 2030, school building itself at risk. It was 2024. They were 1 year away from children playing in poisoned dirt. We need current samples. Marcus's mind was already working through logistics. Lab analysis from right now showing the contamination has spread since your father's cleanup. That's the only way to prove Victor is covering up an active threat. I know someone. Catherine pulled out her phone, then hesitated. If we do this, there's no going back. Victor will know I'm investigating. He'll come after both of us. Marcus thought about Isaiah, about 300 children who didn't know they were playing near poison, about Sarah, who died believing in the goodness people were capable of when given the chance. Then we'd better move fast. Catherine made the call. 20 minutes later, they were meeting Dr. James Morrison in the parking lot of an environmental testing lab on the edge of town. He was white, mid-50s, with the permanent squint of someone who'd spent decades looking through microscopes. His credentials included a PhD in environmental science and a reputation for not caring who he pissed off with his findings. Catherine Westfield. He greeted her with professional courtesy and barely concealed surprise. When you called, I assumed this was about one of your development projects, not investigating one. My father trusted you. Catherine handed him copies of Robert's environmental surveys. I'm hoping I can, too. Dr. Morrison read through the documents with increasing alarm. By the 3rd page, he was swearing under his breath. Sterling Chemical. I testified against them in 2001. They buried my findings under so many legal motions, the case never went to trial. He looked at Marcus. You live in this neighborhood? My son goes to Riverside Elementary. Then get him tested. Blood work, full panel. These contaminant levels, if they've spread like your father predicted. Dr. Morrison didn't finish. Didn't need to. At midnight, 3 figures moved through the woods behind Riverside Elementary. Catherine held a flashlight, while Dr. Morrison collected soil samples, carefully labeling each container with GPS coordinates and depth measurements. Marcus kept watch, though for what, he wasn't sure. Police? Security guards? Victor Sterling's hired thugs? The October air bit through Marcus's jacket. He could see the school building through the trees, dark windows, empty playground,
the swing set Isaiah loved.
In daylight, this place meant safety. In darkness, with contamination maps fresh in his mind, it looked like a crime scene waiting to be discovered. This doesn't look good. Dr. Morrison had excavated about 18 inches down. The soil had a weird discoloration, almost greenish in the flashlight beam. Petroleum-based compounds. You can smell them once you know what you're looking for. Marcus knelt beside the hole. The chemical odor was faint but distinct, like the basement of an old gas station. How long for results? Rush analysis? 24 hours for preliminary data. Dr. Morrison sealed the sample containers. Full toxicology will take longer, but the basics, chromium, lead, arsenic, I can have those by tomorrow night. They collected samples from 6 different locations, working in silence except for whispered coordinates and warnings about exposed routes. By 1 a.m., they had enough evidence to prove the contamination had spread significantly since Robert Westfield's cleanup attempt. By 1:15 a.m., Marcus's phone was buzzing with a call from Mrs. Henderson. "Marcus, baby, you need to come home. Isaiah's having trouble breathing. Real trouble. I called 911. The world narrowed to a tunnel. Marcus was running before he consciously decided to move. Catherine and Dr. Morrison forgotten, the samples forgotten, everything forgotten except Isaiah struggling for air. "I'm coming! 10 minutes! Tell them I'm coming!" He made it in 7, running 2 red lights and taking corners fast enough that his tires screamed. The ambulance was already outside his building, its lights painting the street in urgent red and blue. Mrs. Henderson stood on the sidewalk in her nightgown and coat, her face streaked with tears. "He couldn't breathe, Marcus." The inhaler wasn't working. His lips were turning blue. The paramedics had Isaiah on a gurney, oxygen mask over his small face. His eyes were wide with fear, searching for Marcus in the crowd. Marcus grabbed his son's hand, running alongside the gurney as they loaded him into the ambulance. "I'm here, buddy. I'm right here. You're going to be okay." The ride to Cedar Valley Memorial was 3 miles that felt like 300. Isaiah's oxygen saturation kept dropping despite the mask. The paramedic, a young black woman with steady hands, started an IV, her movements efficient and practiced. "Has he been exposed to any chemicals recently? Paint fumes, cleaning products, anything unusual?" Marcus thought about the woods behind Riverside Elementary, about soil contaminated with industrial solvents, about children playing in poison for years. "I don't know. Maybe. We need to run a full toxicology panel." The paramedic's eyes sharpened. "Why toxicology?" "Because I think my son has been poisoned." Cedar Valley Memorial's emergency room at 2 a.m. was a special kind of purgatory. Fluorescent lights that turned everyone the color of corpses, the smell of disinfectant fighting a losing battle against human suffering. Monitors beeping in Morse code messages about people dying too young. Marcus sat in a plastic chair outside Isaiah's room, still wearing his jacket from the woods, dirt under his fingernails from helping collect soil samples. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd been gathering evidence that children were being poisoned while his own child was struggling to breathe. Mrs. Henderson had followed in her car. She sat beside him now, her hand on his shoulder, praying in a whisper too quiet for Marcus to make out the words. He was grateful for the presence, even if he couldn't share the faith. Sarah had been a nurse here, had walked these hallways in her scrubs, had saved lives in rooms just like the one where Isaiah now lay connected to monitors. Marcus wondered if she'd ever treated children with contamination-related illnesses, if she'd known what she was seeing, but couldn't prove it. If that's why she'd asked Robert Westfield about legacy. Catherine appeared at 2:30 a.m., still in her dirt-stained jeans, her hair wild from the night's work. She looked around the emergency room with an expression Marcus couldn't quite read. Discomfort, maybe. Or recognition. "How is he?" "Stable. They're running tests." Marcus's voice came out flat, exhausted. "Including the toxicology panel I requested." Catherine sat down across from him, maintaining a careful distance Mrs. Henderson could approve of.
This is the same hospital where my father... She stopped, started again. Where your wife worked.
I know. They sat in silence. Around them, the emergency room continued its chaotic rhythm. A drunk man arguing with security. A woman with a broken arm filling out insurance paperwork. A child crying somewhere out of sight. The normal catastrophes of human existence. I need to tell you something. Catherine's voice was different, quieter. When Melanie called you tonight, she wasn't supposed to. I didn't ask her to reach out. Marcus looked at her sharply. Someone else sent that text, using Melanie's phone. Catherine pulled out her own phone, showing him a message thread. This is from the real Melanie, 30 minutes ago. Someone accessed my contacts, sent message to Marcus Cole. I didn't authorize it. The cold feeling from earlier returned, stronger now. Then who did? Victor Sterling, or someone working for him. Catherine's jaw tightened. He knew about our meeting at the park, about the bank, about the soil samples, which means he's been watching us since you first asked questions at that community meeting. Marcus thought about the woman who'd approached him with environmental documents. Rebecca Stone. Had she been real? Or another plant? As if reading his mind, Catherine said, I had my people check. Rebecca Stone is a real reporter, but the documents she showed you? Those came from somewhere inside Westfield Industries, which means Victor wanted you to have that information. Why? To make you angry enough to do something stupid. To give him justification for... Catherine stopped, her face going pale. Marcus, where's Isaiah during the day? Who watches him? School. Then Mrs. Henderson if I'm working late. Why? Because if Victor wanted to send a message to show you the cost of interfering with his plans... She didn't finish. Didn't have to. Marcus was on his feet, the plastic chair clattering backward. Mrs. Henderson grabbed his arm before he could do something that would get him arrested. Baby, no. You can't go after him. You can't leave Isaiah. She was right. Marcus forced himself to breathe, to think, to be the man Sarah had believed he could be instead of the man grief and rage wanted to make him. We need proof. His voice was steadier than he felt. Not just environmental data. We need evidence that Victor knew, that he's been covering it up, that he's willing to hurt children to protect his family's reputation. Catherine nodded slowly. My father's papers. There must be more. Communications between Robert and Victor. Something that shows the cover-up was intentional. Where? The office. My office. Catherine checked her watch. An elegant thing that probably cost more than Marcus's truck. Victor has access to the building, but if we're careful... A doctor emerged from Isaiah's room. Young, white, female, with the kind of tired eyes that said she'd been on shift too long, but couldn't leave until someone else arrived. Her name tag read Dr. Sarah Chen. Marcus's breath caught. Sarah. Different Sarah. Wrong Sarah. But the name still hit like a fist. Mr. Cole, your son is stable. The breathing episode was likely triggered by an acute asthma exacerbation, but we're seeing some concerning markers in his preliminary blood work. What kind of markers? Dr. Chen pulled up results on her tablet. Elevated levels of several heavy metals, lead, chromium, traces of arsenic. Nothing immediately life-threatening, but consistent with environmental exposure over an extended period. Marcus felt Catherine go rigid beside him. Can you tell where the exposure came from? Catherine's voice carried the weight of someone who already knew the answer. Not specifically. Could be old paint, contaminated water, soil exposure. Dr. Chen scrolled through the results. I'm recommending follow-up with a pediatric toxicologist. This level of contamination suggests ongoing exposure, not a single incident. Marcus thought about 200 yards, about children playing, about soil samples Dr. Morrison was analyzing right now. How many other kids from Riverside Elementary have you seen with similar markers? Dr. Chen's expression shifted, professional caution warring with ethical obligation. I can't discuss other patients, but I can tell you that Cedar Valley Memorial has been tracking an unusual cluster of pediatric cases in your zip code for about 3 years. Respiratory issues, developmental delays, cardiac abnormalities. The patterns are suggestive of environmental factors, but we haven't been able to identify a source. Because the people who know the source have been covering it up, Marcus said. Dr. Chen looked at him for a long moment. Then she did something doctors aren't supposed to do. She turned her tablet so he could see the screen. A graph showing pediatric illness rates by neighborhood. Riverside area was a red spike among otherwise normal data. I became a doctor to help people. Her voice was barely above a whisper. But sometimes the people who need help most are being hurt by people I can't touch. People with lawyers and money and power. She turned the tablet back, the moment of rebellion over. Your son can go home in the morning. Keep him away from whatever's causing the exposure. And Mr. Cole, if you figure out what that source is, if you find evidence that someone's been poisoning children intentionally, she paused. Make sure the right people find out. After she left, Marcus and Catherine looked at each other. We go to your office, Marcus said. Tonight. Right now. We find everything we can before Victor realizes we're there. If he catches us, then we make sure he doesn't. Mrs. Henderson stood, her spine straight despite the late hour, despite her age, despite everything. I'll stay with Isaiah. You two do what needs doing. She fixed Catherine with a look that could have melted steel. And Miss Westfield? I knew your father. Knew him from church, before he got too important for neighborhood congregations. Robert was a good man who made bad choices until someone reminded him what goodness looked like. You got a chance to honor his memory proper. Don't waste it. Catherine's eyes were wet. She nodded, unable to speak. They left Mrs. Henderson keeping vigil, left Isaiah sleeping under hospital lights, left the safety of public spaces and witnesses for the dangerous privacy of corporate offices at 3 a.m. The Westfield Industries building loomed against the pre-dawn sky, dark except for scattered lights on upper floors where security guards made their rounds. Catherine swiped her access card at the executive entrance. The lock clicked open with a sound like a gun being cocked. Security changes shift at 4. Her voice was barely audible. We have 53 minutes. They took the stairs instead of the elevator, their footsteps echoing in the concrete stairwell. 16 floors. Marcus's legs were burning by the top, but the pain kept him focused, kept him from thinking about Isaiah alone in a hospital bed. Catherine's office was corner suite with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Millbrook. In daylight, it probably looked like power. At 3 a.m., it looked like a fishbowl, exposed, vulnerable, watched. My father's files are in the executive archive. Catherine moved to a wall panel that looked decorative but swung open to reveal a hidden room. This was his private office before he retired. I kept it sealed. Couldn't bear to sort through his things. The archive was smaller than Marcus expected. Just a desk, filing cabinets, and walls covered in photographs. Robert Westfield shaking hands with politicians, cutting ribbons at hospital openings, standing beside a younger Catherine at her college graduation. And there, in the corner, Robert in his hospital bed at Cedar Valley Memorial. Sarah beside him, smiling that smile that had made Marcus fall in love with her 12 years ago. Catherine saw him staring. That's the only photo my father kept on his desk after his heart attack. Not family, not business achievements. Just the nurse who asked him what he was building his life on. Marcus touched the frame, feeling the weight of connection across time. Sarah had changed this man's heart. Robert had tried to protect children. Now those children were dying anyway, because Victor Sterling cared more about profit than human life. The filing cabinets were organized chronologically, Catherine pulled files from 2003, spreading them across Robert's desk. Purchase agreements for the contaminated land, correspondence with Victor Sterling, and buried in the back of the second drawer, a folder marked Personal, Legacy Project. Inside, letters, dozens of them. Handwritten correspondence between Robert Westfield and Sarah Cole, dating from 2016 through 2018. Marcus's hands shook as he opened the first one. Sarah's handwriting, her voice preserved in blue ink. Dear Mr. Westfield, thank you for your generous donation to the Cedar Valley Memorial Pediatric Ward. But I must be honest, I didn't ask you to give money. I asked you to think about what legacy you're building. Money is easy for men like you.
What's hard is changing the systems that need changing. What's hard is protecting people who can't protect themselves. I hope you'll consider doing the hard thing. With respect, Sarah Cole, RN. Robert's response was paperclipped to the back. Dear Nurse Sarah, you're right. Money is easy. I've built my entire life on easy choices. But I think I'm ready to try hard ones. I've been researching the property Victor Sterling is trying to unload, the old chemical plant site. I know it's contaminated. I know he's trying to sell it before anyone asks questions. What if I bought it? What if I forced a cleanup by selling it for a use that requires environmental oversight? Would that be a hard choice worth making? Tell me honestly. R.W. There were more letters. A correspondence spanning 2 years chronicling Robert's transformation from ruthless CEO to someone trying to build a legacy that mattered. Sarah had been his conscience, his guide through moral territory he'd never navigated before. The last letter was dated March 2018, 3 months before Sarah's cancer diagnosis. Dear Robert, I'm so proud of what you've accomplished. The school is built, the land is clean. 300 children have a safe place to learn because you chose to do the hard thing. But I need to tell you something difficult. My husband doesn't know about our correspondence. I've kept it private because I didn't want him to think I was asking favors from wealthy patients. He's a proud man, works himself to exhaustion to provide for our family. If something happens to me, and with my family history of cancer, something might. Please don't tell him about this. Let him believe in a world where people do good things without connection or obligation. Let him believe in pure kindness. He needs that belief more than he needs to know the whole truth. Your friend, Sarah. Marcus had to set the letter down, had to breathe. Sarah had known she might get cancer, had been planning for it, preparing for it, even as she was helping a billionaire find his conscience. She asked him not to tell you. Catherine's voice was gentle. That's why you never knew. Your wife was protecting your faith in humanity. She was protecting me. Marcus wiped his eyes. Even from the grave, she was trying to keep me from becoming hard. They found what they needed in the next folder. Email correspondence between Robert and Victor Sterling, dated 2003. Victor's messages were increasingly desperate as he realized what Robert was doing with the contaminated property. You're making a mistake, Robert. That land is toxic. If the school district does proper testing, they'll find the contamination. My company will be liable for hundreds of millions in cleanup costs. Robert's response. Then perhaps your company should have cleaned it up properly 20 years ago, instead of poisoning a neighborhood to save money. I'm giving you a chance to do the right thing quietly. Take it. Victor's final email was a threat. If you proceed with this sale, I will make sure everyone knows Westfield Industries was complicit. Your daughter will inherit a company with a destroyed reputation. Is one neighborhood really worth that? Robert's answer was a single sentence. Yes, because Nurse Sarah taught me that people are worth more than reputations. Catherine photographed every document with her phone. Marcus did the same, creating redundant backups. They were almost finished when footsteps echoed in the outer office. Catherine's eyes went wide. She mouthed one word. Victor. They froze.
The footsteps came closer.
There Victor Sterling's voice speaking to someone on the phone.
I don't care what time it is. Find out if Catherine accessed her father's archive tonight. Check the security logs. And someone tell me where Marcus Cole is right now.
Catherine grabbed Marcus's arm, pulled him toward a second door he hadn't noticed, an emergency exit leading to the executive stairwell. They slipped through just as Victor entered the outer office, closing the door with a silence that felt like holding their breath underwater. Down the stairs, fast but not running. Running would make noise. They reached the ground floor at 3:58 a.m., 2 minutes before the security shift change. They burst through the emergency exit into the pre-dawn darkness. No alarm. Catherine had disabled it with her executive override. They were in the alley behind the building, surrounded by dumpsters and loading docks and the smell of urban morning. Marcus's truck was 3 blocks away. They ran. Behind them, they could hear Victor's voice echoing from an upper window, shouting at security to lock down the building. Too late. They were already gone, melting into the industrial landscape of downtown Millbrook as the eastern sky began to lighten with the promise of sunrise. They made it to Marcus's truck. Catherine climbed in beside him, both of them breathing hard, adrenaline making their hands shake. We have it. Catherine was checking her phone, making sure the photos had uploaded to her cloud storage. Everything. Robert's letters, the emails, proof that Victor knew the land was contaminated when he sold it. And proof that your father tried to fix it. Marcus started the engine. That he spent the last years of his life trying to protect children because my wife showed him they mattered. Where now? Marcus thought about Isaiah in the hospital, about Dr. Morrison's soil samples, about 300 children playing in poison. Now we finish what they started. His phone rang. Dr. Morrison. I have your preliminary results. You need to hear this. Dr. Morrison's voice came through the phone speaker with the flat certainty of someone delivering a death sentence. Chromium hexavalent at 18 times the legal limit. Lead concentrations consistent with industrial contamination. Benzene derivatives in the soil at depths suggesting decades of accumulation. Mr. Cole, those children have been playing on top of a Superfund site that was never properly remediated. Marcus gripped the steering wheel hard enough to make his knuckles ache. Beside him, Catherine had gone pale in the dashboard light. How bad? Bad enough that I'm legally obligated to report this to the EPA within 24 hours. Bad enough that every child who's attended Riverside Elementary in the past decade needs immediate blood screening. Bad enough that Victor Sterling should be in federal prison. Dr. Morrison paused. I'm sending you the full analysis now. Use it however you need to. Just get those kids away from that school. The email arrived with a ping, 30 pages of technical data that translated to one simple truth. Victor Sterling had been knowingly poisoning children for 20 years to avoid cleanup costs. Catherine was already forwarding the documents. EPA Regional Office, FBI Environmental Crimes Division, State Attorney General, Washington Post Environmental Desk, CNN Investigative Unit. Her fingers moved across her phone screen with practiced efficiency. Each send button clicked felt like a small detonation. Victor will know within the hour. Marcus pulled out of the parking space, heading back toward Cedar Valley Memorial. He'll come after us. Let him. Catherine's voice carried steel Marcus hadn't heard before. Cold. Determined. I've got Robert's correspondence. You've got environmental proof. Dr. Morrison's analysis connects them. Victor can't threaten all of us fast enough to stop this. Marcus's phone buzzed. Rebecca Stone, the reporter. Mr. Cole, I'm getting alerts that someone just sent the Sterling chemical story to every major news outlet simultaneously. Was that you? It was necessary. I'll have a story online in an hour, front page tomorrow. Can you get me a quote? Something that explains what this means for the families? Marcus thought about Isaiah struggling to breathe, about Dr. Chen's graph showing red spikes of pediatric illness, about 300 children whose parents had no idea they'd been living on poisoned ground. Tell them this.
Some people build empires on other people's suffering. They count on silence, on complexity, on victims being too poor or too scared to fight back. But my wife taught me that every child matters more than any amount of money. She taught a dying billionaire the same lesson. And now we're making sure that lesson sticks, no matter what it costs.
Rebecca was typing fast enough that Marcus could hear keys clicking. That's perfect. One more thing. I'm hearing Victor Sterling has disappeared. Left his office, turned off his phone. Any idea where he might go? Marcus felt ice crystallize in his stomach. A man with everything to lose, facing federal charges and public exposure, didn't just disappear for innocent reasons. Catherine, where would Victor run? He has a house in the Poconos, hunting cabin his father built.
Remote, off-grid. He goes there when...
Catherine stopped mid-sentence, her face draining of color. Marcus, we need to get to the hospital. Right now. She was already dialing, her phone pressed to her ear with white-knuckled intensity. Mrs. Henderson, it's Catherine Westfield. Is Isaiah still with you? Don't let anyone near him. Security, nurses, anyone you don't personally recognize. We're 10 minutes away. Marcus pressed the accelerator, running a yellow light that had already started turning red. The truck's engine protested, but complied. What did she say? A woman tried to take Isaiah 20 minutes ago. Claims she was a social worker, had paperwork about emergency custody due to unsafe living conditions. Mrs. Henderson told her to come back with a police officer. The woman left. Marcus's vision tunneled. His hands moved on autopilot, navigating streets he barely registered, while his mind raced through scenarios, each one worse than the last. Victor couldn't make the environmental data disappear, but he could send a message, could show Marcus the cost of interference, could take Isaiah. They pulled into Cedar Valley Memorial's parking lot at 4:47 a.m. The emergency room entrance glowed with fluorescent urgency. Marcus was out of the truck before it fully stopped, Catherine right behind him, both of them running through automatic doors that opened too slowly. Mrs. Henderson stood outside Isaiah's room like a sentinel. Behind her, 2 hospital security guards flanked the door. She saw Marcus, and her entire body sagged with relief. He's safe, baby. Still sleeping. But that woman, she had official-looking papers. If I hadn't been here, if it had been a nurse who didn't know better. Marcus pulled her into a hug. This elderly woman who'd stood between his son and whatever Victor Sterling had planned. Thank you. God, thank you. Inside the room, Isaiah slept peacefully, oxygen saturation normal, breathing easy. He looked small in the hospital bed, vulnerable in a way that made Marcus's chest constrict. 8 years old. Just a child. Caught in a war between people who should have known better. Catherine stood in the doorway, not entering, maintaining distance as if she didn't have the right to share this space. I called building security. Her voice was quiet but firm. Tripled the guards on this floor. Nobody gets near Isaiah without going through me personally. Marcus looked at her. This woman who'd mocked Sarah's watch, who'd threatened to demolish Isaiah's school, who'd offered blood money to buy his silence. She'd changed. Not completely, not yet, but enough that Marcus could see the person Robert Westfield had hoped his daughter would become. Why are you doing this? Catherine met his eyes. For the first time since they'd met, he saw vulnerability there. Real emotion beneath the CEO armor. Because your wife saved my father's soul. Because Robert spent his last years trying to protect children he'd never meet. Because I've wasted 5 years destroying his legacy while telling myself I was honoring it. Her voice cracked slightly. And because if something happened to your son because of my company's crimes, I couldn't live with that. A doctor appeared. Not Dr. Chen, but an older black man with gray at his temples, and the bearing of someone who'd been practicing medicine since before Marcus was born. His name tag read, Dr. Franklin Webb, Chief of Pediatrics.
Mr. Cole, we need to discuss your son's test results and what they mean going forward. They moved to a consultation room down the hall. Catherine started to leave, but Dr. Webb gestured for her to stay. You're Catherine Westfield. I remember your father. His tone was neutral, but his eyes were sharp. Robert donated the money for our new pediatric wing. Came to the ribbon cutting 6 months before he died. Told me he was trying to make up for mistakes he'd made in business. He was a complicated man. Catherine's response was careful. Complicated men often are. Doesn't make the good things they do less valuable. Doctor.
Webb opened a tablet, pulling up Isaiah's charts. Your son has elevated heavy metal levels consistent with chronic environmental exposure. Not immediately life-threatening, but concerning. We're starting chelation therapy this morning to help his body eliminate the toxins. How long will it take? Marcus heard his own voice like it belonged to someone else. Weeks, possibly months, depending on how deeply the metals have accumulated in his tissues.
He'll need regular monitoring, blood work every 2 weeks, dietary modifications. Dr. Webb scrolled through the data. I've been tracking similar cases in Riverside area for 3 years. Didn't have enough evidence to establish a pattern until now. Your son is the 47th child I've treated with this constellation of symptoms. 47. The number hit like a fist. That's just at Cedar Valley Memorial, Dr. Webb continued. Other hospitals, other doctors who maybe didn't connect the dots. We could be looking at over 100 affected children, maybe more. Catherine made a sound like she'd been struck. Her phone was already out, fingers moving across the screen. I'm establishing a medical fund. Immediate coverage for every child in the Riverside district. Testing, treatment, whatever they need. No insurance requirements, no paperwork delays. Dr. Webb's eyebrows rose. That's going to cost millions. My father's estate is worth $340 million. This is exactly what he would have wanted. Catherine's voice was steady now, certain. How quickly can we get screenings set up for all current and former Riverside students? If you're serious about funding it, we could have mobile testing units at the school by Monday. Make it happen. Dr. Webb studied Catherine for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Something like approval flickered across his face. Your father would be proud. He made mistakes, but he tried to fix them. That matters. After he left, Marcus and Catherine sat in silence. Through the window, dawn was breaking over Millbrook. The city looked clean in the early light, innocent, like it wasn't built on decades of poison and cover-ups, and children paying the price for adult greed. We need to go public. Marcus's words came out flat. Not just reports to government agencies, not just newspaper articles. We need to make this so visible Victor Sterling can't hide. Press conference. Catherine was already thinking through logistics. Every major outlet, the environmental data, Robert's letters, Dr. Morrison's analysis, put it all on record where it can't be buried. Marcus's phone rang. Unknown number. He answered on speaker. Mr. Cole, this is Special Agent Jennifer Martinez, FBI Environmental Crimes Division. We received your submission about the Sterling chemical contamination. I need to meet with you immediately. They arranged to meet at the hospital in 30 minutes. Marcus used the time to check on Isaiah one more time, watching his son sleep with the innocent trust of a child who believed his father could protect him from anything. Mrs. Henderson had fallen asleep in the bedside chair, her hand still resting protectively on Isaiah's arm. Marcus covered her with a blanket from the supply closet. This woman who'd stood guard when it mattered most. Special Agent Martinez arrived with 2 other agents, all of them in dark suits that screamed federal authority. She was Latina, mid-40s, with a kind of direct gaze that suggested she'd seen every variety of corporate crime and wasn't impressed by any of it. Let me be clear about what we're looking at here. Martinez spread the documents across the consultation room table. 30 years of knowing environmental contamination, multiple violations of the Clean Water Act, the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, and criminal provisions of the Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation, and Liability Act. We're talking decades in federal prison. For Victor Sterling specifically? Catherine leaned forward. For anyone who knew about the contamination and actively concealed it. That could include corporate officers, board members, anyone with decision-making authority who chose profit over public health. Martinez's eyes locked on Catherine. Including CEOs. The implication hung heavy. Catherine didn't flinch. My father bought that property specifically to force a cleanup. I have his correspondence proving it. I didn't know about the ongoing contamination until 3 days ago, and I've spent every hour since gathering evidence against Victor Sterling. She pulled out her phone, showing the email timestamps. Everything I've learned, I've immediately shared with relevant authorities. Martinez reviewed the timeline, her expression giving nothing away. You're cooperating fully? Completely. My company's records, my father's private papers, access to any employee who has information. Whatever you need. Good, because we're going to need it all. Martinez turned to Marcus. Mr. Cole, your son's medical records establish harm to a minor from the contamination. That makes this not just an environmental crime, but also child endangerment. Multiple counts. Marcus thought about 47 children at Cedar Valley Memorial alone. Thought about the graph Dr. Chen had shown him, the red spike of illness concentrated in one neighborhood. How many counts? As many victims as we can document. Every child who's been exposed, every family that suffered medical costs, every property owner whose land value was destroyed by concealed contamination. Martinez's smile was predatory. Victor Sterling is going to die in prison. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, her expression shifting to something harder. We just got a hit on Sterling's credit card. Gas station in Carbon County, Pennsylvania, Poconos region. He's running. Catherine stood abruptly. His cabin. I know where it is. How well do you know it? I've been there twice. Family retreats when I was younger. Remote, accessible by one dirt road, surrounded by state forest. Martinez was already coordinating with her team, speaking in rapid tactical shorthand. How long to get a tactical unit up there? 3 hours minimum from Philadelphia. We could have state police there faster, but if Sterling's armed and barricaded, he won't be armed, Catherine cut in. Victor's not violent. He's a coward who hides behind lawyers and corporate structure. If you corner him, he'll surrender. Martinez didn't look convinced. Corporate types surprise you sometimes, especially when they're facing life in prison. The morning unfolded in controlled chaos. Federal agents descended on Westfield Industries headquarters with warrants. News crews gathered outside, their satellite trucks creating an impromptu media village. Rebecca Stone's article went live at 7 a.m., followed by a CNN breaking news alert at 7:15. By 8 a.m., Sterling Chemical was trending nationally. The story had everything modern media craved: environmental crime, sick children, a whistleblowing CEO, and a villain fleeing into the mountains. Marcus watched it unfold from Isaiah's hospital room, his son finally awake and eating Jell-O while cartoons played on the mounted television. Isaiah didn't understand why his room was guarded, didn't know his father had spent the night gathering evidence against a man who'd poisoned him and hundreds of other children. He just knew Dad was here, which meant everything was okay. Dad, when can we go home? Marcus smoothed Isaiah's hair back from his forehead, feeling the fever that had finally broken. Soon, buddy. Doctors want to make sure you're all better first. Mrs. Henderson said a lady tried to take me last night. Marcus's hand stilled. What did Mrs. Henderson tell you? That the lady was confused, that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Isaiah's eyes, Sarah's eyes, studied his father with that uncanny wisdom 8-year-olds sometimes displayed. But you're scared, Dad. You're doing the jaw thing. Marcus forced himself to relax. Isaiah had inherited Sarah's perceptiveness along with her eyes. I'm handling some grown-up stuff. Nothing for you to worry about. Is it about my school? Mia's mom said they're going to tear it down.
The question hurt more than Marcus expected. In all the chaos of contamination and cover-ups, he'd almost forgotten the original fight. The school demolition, the shopping mall,
The neighborhood that was supposed to disappear. We're working on saving it. Marcus chose his words carefully. Some people made bad choices a long time ago. Now we're trying to fix those choices.
like how Mom used to fix broken things.
The comparison caught Marcus off guard. Sarah had been a fixer, found broken furniture at yard sales and restored it, took in stray cats until their apartment was a sanctuary, believed that nothing was beyond repair if you cared enough to try.
Yeah, like that. Isaiah nodded, satisfied with this answer, and returned his attention to cartoons. Marcus watched him for a moment, this small person who'd been through too much, who was braver than any 8-year-old should have to be. A commotion in the hallway pulled Marcus's attention, raised voices, someone arguing with security. He stepped outside to find Diane Walker being stopped by hospital guards. Her daughter Mia stood beside her, wide-eyed and frightened.
Marcus, thank God.
They won't let us past. I need to know. The news is saying Riverside is contaminated, that our children have been poisoned. Is Mia? Her voice broke. The question she couldn't finish hung in the air like smoke.
Dr. Webb is setting up free screening for all Riverside students. Marcus kept his voice gentle.
Starting Monday. He'll test Mia, run a full panel, make sure she gets whatever treatment she needs. Who's paying for this? I don't have insurance. Can't afford. It's covered. All of it. Testing, treatment, everything.
Diane looked at him like he'd just promised her the moon.
How? Because someone finally decided to do the right thing. More families arrived throughout the morning, parents who'd seen the news, who were connecting dots they'd never noticed before. The asthma cases, the learning disabilities, the strange cluster of childhood cancers, all of it making terrible sense now that they understood about the poison in their soil. Doctor. Webb moved between families with practiced compassion, explaining the testing protocols, answering medical questions, projecting calm competence while the world outside spiraled into media frenzy. At 10 a.m., Catherine held an impromptu press conference in the hospital lobby. She stood without notes, without teleprompter, speaking directly into news cameras from every major network. My name is Catherine Westfield. 5 days ago, I was CEO of Westfield Industries, a company my father built. Today, I'm here to tell you that my company, under the leadership of COO Victor Sterling, has been covering up environmental contamination that has poisoned children for over 20 years. She didn't sugarcoat, didn't spin, just laid out the truth with surgical precision. The contaminated land, Sterling Chemicals' knowing violations, Robert Westfield's attempt at remediation, Victor Sterling's ongoing cover-up. My father tried to fix this mistake. He bought contaminated property and sold it to trigger mandatory cleanup. But Victor Sterling undermined that effort, let the contamination spread, and when exposure became inevitable, planned to demolish the school and bury evidence under a shopping mall. The reporters erupted with questions. Catherine silenced them with a raised hand. I'm establishing the Robert Westfield Environmental Justice Foundation with my entire personal inheritance. $340 million dedicated to cleaning up Sterling Chemical sites nationwide, providing medical care for affected families, and ensuring this never happens again. She paused, her voice softening. My father learned too late that legacy isn't measured in quarterly earnings. It's measured in lives protected and futures preserved. I'm honoring that lesson. One reporter pushed through the crowd. Ms. Westfield, there are reports Victor Sterling has fled. Do you know where he is? Federal agents are handling that situation. I trust they'll bring him to justice. Will you face charges yourself? If investigators determine I had knowledge I should have acted on sooner, I'll accept whatever consequences are appropriate. But my priority right now is making sure every child who was harmed gets the care they need. Marcus watched from the edge of the crowd. This wasn't the woman who'd mocked Sarah's watch.
Wasn't the CEO who'd casually demolished neighborhoods.
This was someone new. Someone becoming the person Robert Westfield had hoped to raise before corporate culture twisted those hopes into something cold. Catherine caught his eye through the cameras and reporters, gave him a small nod, an acknowledgement that they'd done this together, that Sarah's lesson had reached across death and time to change both of them. Marcus's phone buzzed. Special Agent Martinez. "We have Sterling." Pennsylvania State Police found him at the cabin. He's in custody, being transported back to Pennsylvania for federal arraignment. Cooperative so far. Thinks he can lawyer his way out of this. Can he? Not a chance in hell. We've got 30 years of documented violations, internal memos showing he knew about the contamination, and evidence he actively concealed information from regulatory agencies. He's going to federal prison for the rest of his life. Marcus felt something release in his chest. Not quite relief, not quite satisfaction. Just the exhausted certainty that this part was over, that the man who'd poisoned his son would face consequences. There's something else. Martinez's tone shifted. We found documents at the cabin. Sterling kept files on every decision he made regarding the contamination, detailed notes about choosing to conceal rather than clean up, calculations showing it was cheaper to fight lawsuits than fix the problem. He documented his own crimes. Why would he do that? Insurance. If the company ever tried to make him the fall guy, he had evidence showing the board knew. He collected leverage on everyone. Martinez paused. Including your wife. Marcus's blood ran cold. What? Notes from 2016. Sterling tracked Robert Westfield's hospital stay. Identified the nurse who was influencing him, Sarah Cole. He had someone follow her, document her routine, gather information he could use if needed. The violation hit Marcus like a physical blow. Victor Sterling had stalked Sarah, had seen her as a threat to his cover-up, had collected data on her movements, her habits, her family. Did he? Marcus couldn't finish the question. Did he have anything to do with Sarah's cancer? No evidence of that. The medical records are clear, natural causes. Martinez's voice was gentle now, understanding what she was telling a grieving husband. But he knew about her, knew about you, knew about Isaiah. And when you started asking questions about the school demolition, he recognized your name. Marcus's knees felt weak. He sat down on a hallway bench, trying to process this new layer of violation. That's why he targeted me specifically. Yes, Sterling saw you as the continuation of a threat that started with your wife. He tried to neutralize you with money, with intimidation, and when those failed, Martinez didn't finish, didn't need to. The woman who tried to take Isaiah, the fake custody papers, Victor Sterling's final desperate play to silence someone he'd been watching for 8 years. Mr. Cole, I'm telling you this because you need to know how deep this goes. Sterling didn't just poison your neighborhood. He weaponized his knowledge about people he saw as obstacles. Your wife changed Robert Westfield's heart, which threatened Sterling's cover-up. He's been trying to undo that change ever since. After Martinez hung up, Marcus sat in the hospital corridor for a long time. Nurses passed, visitors came and went. The morning shifted into afternoon. Through it all, Marcus held Sarah's watch, feeling its imperfect rhythm. She'd saved Robert Westfield's soul. Robert had tried to save 300 children. Catherine was using her inheritance to clean up the poison, and Marcus had exposed the whole ugly truth. A chain of redemption stretching across years, connected by Sarah's simple belief that people could choose to be better. Dr. Webb found him there around 2 p.m. Isaiah's chelation therapy is progressing well. We're seeing good clearance of the heavy metals. He should be able to go home tomorrow. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. He'll need months of treatment. Dietary restrictions, regular monitoring. Dr. Webb sat beside Marcus on the bench. I treated your wife during her cancer treatment. Did you know that? Marcus looked at him sharply. Sarah never mentioned you. Different department, but the hospital's not that big. We crossed paths during her chemotherapy sessions. I remember her because she kept apologizing for being a difficult patient, which was absurd. She was the easiest patient we had. Kind to everyone, never complained. That was Sarah. She talked about you constantly. Her husband, who worked himself into exhaustion to keep them afloat, who read bedtime stories to your infant son between double shifts, who made her laugh even when the nausea was so bad she couldn't keep anything down. Dr. Webb's voice was quiet. She said you were the best man she'd ever known. Said if anything happened to her, you needed to remember to stay soft, not to let grief turn you hard. Promise number 2. Don't let grief make you hard. I've been failing that promise. Marcus's voice cracked. No, you've been human. But what you did these past few days, exposing Sterling, protecting those children, working with Catherine Westfield despite every reason to hate her, that's staying soft. That's refusing to let bitterness consume you. Dr. Webb stood. Your wife would be proud. Your son already is. The words settled over Marcus like a blessing, like Sarah's hand on his shoulder, like forgiveness for the hardness that had accumulated over 2 years of grief and struggle. Catherine appeared at the end of the hallway, flanked by FBI agents and hospital security. She looked exhausted, hollowed out, but there was something else in her expression now. Peace, maybe, or at least the beginning of it. The FBI wants statements from both of us. Her voice was steady despite the exhaustion. They're building the case against Victor. Expect this to take months. I'll testify, whatever they need. Marcus. Catherine hesitated, uncharacteristically uncertain. After all this is over, after the trial and the cleanup and the foundation gets established, would you consider working with me? Not as an electrician, as someone who knows what this community needs. Someone who can make sure the resources actually reach the people who need them. Marcus thought about the bills on his kitchen table, about Isaiah's medical expenses, about the promise he'd made to take care of his son, which was getting harder every month. But he also thought about Sarah, about the kind of work that mattered, about building something that would protect children for generations instead of just getting through the next week. Let me think about it. That's all I ask. The FBI interviews took hours. Marcus recounted everything: the basement humiliation, the midnight bribe, finding the environmental documents, the hospital break-in at Victor's cabin. Catherine corroborated where their stories overlapped, provided additional context about Westfield Industries' structure and decision-making processes. Special Agent Martinez listened with the intensity of someone building a case brick by brick. This is going to trial in federal court. High profile, media circus, every environmental group in the country watching. You both need to be prepared for that. Will the children get justice? Marcus's question was simple. They'll get their day in court. They'll get medical care. They'll get their neighborhood cleaned up properly. Martinez's expression softened slightly. That's as close to justice as the system can provide. It wasn't enough. Could never be enough for children who'd been poisoned, for families who'd suffered in ignorance, for lives that had been damaged by greed. But it was something. A start. By the time Marcus returned to Isaiah's room, visiting hours were ending. Mrs. Henderson had gone home to rest. Catherine had retreated to deal with the media aftermath. The floor was quiet except for the soft beeping of monitors and the whispered conversations of night shift nurses. Isaiah was asleep again, his small chest rising and falling in the easy rhythm of childhood. The TV played cartoons with the sound muted. Someone, probably Mrs. Henderson, had taped one of Isaiah's drawings to the wall beside the bed. It showed 3 figures, Marcus in his work clothes, Isaiah holding a pencil, and an angel with blonde hair watching over them both. Sarah. Always Sarah. Still present in the art her son created, in the values she'd instilled,
in the chain of redemption she'd started without knowing how far it would reach. Marcus pulled the chair close to the bed, took Isaiah's small hand in his calloused one. "I kept the promises, Sarah." He whispered it to the empty room, to the ghost of his wife, to the memory of better days. Took care of our boy. Didn't let grief make me so hard I couldn't see what needed doing. And the third one, about loving again. He stopped, thought about Catherine, about partnership that wasn't romance but was something. Connection, purpose. Two broken people trying to honor the dead by protecting the living. Maybe that counted. Maybe Sarah would understand that love came in different forms. That opening your heart to working alongside someone, to trusting them with something precious, was its own kind of promise kept. Sarah's watch ticked on his wrist. Still running slow, still imperfect, still faithful. Marcus closed his eyes, listening to the rhythm of his son's breathing and the mechanical heartbeat of the watch. Tomorrow Isaiah would go home. Next week, the full environmental cleanup would begin. Next month, Victor Sterling would face arraignment on federal charges. The future stretched ahead, uncertain, but no longer quite so dark. They'd done something that mattered. Had stopped a man who thought money could bury any crime. Had protected children who deserved better than the world had given them. And Sarah, wherever she was, whatever happened after the end, Sarah would know her husband had stayed soft enough to do the right thing when it mattered most. The watch kept ticking. Some promises you kept even when they broke your heart. Some fights you won even though you lost pieces of yourself in the process. Some legacies lived on through people you'd never meet, through changes you'd never see completed. Marcus sat in the quiet hospital room, holding his son's hand, wearing his dead wife's watch, and felt something like peace. It wouldn't last. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, trials to prepare for, a community to rebuild, a foundation to establish, a son to raise alone. But tonight, just for tonight, Marcus Cole had won. And that was enough. 3 months later, Riverside Elementary stood empty. Not demolished, not buried under shopping mall foundations. Just sealed, pending the EPA's comprehensive soil remediation project. The children attended temporary classrooms in a nearby church basement, while contractors removed 18 inches of poisoned topsoil, replaced it with clean earth, and installed monitoring wells to ensure the contamination wouldn't return. Dr. Morrison supervised the cleanup personally, made sure every safety protocol was followed, made sure the job was done right this time. Marcus stood at the chain-link fence surrounding the construction site, watching earth movers scrape away decades of poison. Isaiah stood beside him, holding the fence with small hands that were slowly recovering from heavy metal exposure. "Will my school be okay, Dad?" "Better than okay. When they're done, it'll be the safest school in Pennsylvania." "And we can go back?" "Yeah, buddy. We can go back." Catherine joined them, arriving in a town car that looked absurdly out of place in this neighborhood. She'd resigned as Westfield Industries' CEO, appointed a new board, restructured the company, removed everyone who'd enabled Victor Sterling's crimes. Now she ran the Robert Westfield Environmental Justice Foundation full-time, wore jeans more often than suits, had dirt under her fingernails from visiting cleanup sites personally. Phase 1 remediation is ahead of schedule. She stood beside Marcus, the three of them watching the construction together. "We'll have the school ready for students by September." "That's good." "I've been thinking about your answer, about whether you'd work with the foundation." Marcus had been thinking about it too. The offer came with salary, benefits, meaningful work. But it also meant leaving Cole Electric. Meant stepping into a world he didn't fully understand. "I'm not qualified for foundation work. Don't have the education, the background." "You have something better," Catherine cut him off. "You have perspective. You know what this community needs because you're part of it. And you understand that protecting children isn't about quarterly reports. It's about doing the hard work even when it costs you everything. Isaiah tugged on Marcus's hand. What's she talking about, Dad? Grown-up job stuff.
Will you still have time to help with my homework? The question cut through all of Marcus's uncertainty. At the end of the day, that's what mattered. Being present for his son. Building a life that honored Sarah's memory while creating space for new possibilities. Always. That's never changing. Then you should take the job. Ms. Catherine is nice, and you like helping people. Out of the mouths of 8-year-olds. Marcus looked at Catherine, saw Robert Westfield's daughter trying to complete her father's redemption, saw someone who'd chosen the hard path when the easy one was still available, saw someone who'd become a partner in the truest sense. Not romantic. That door in Marcus's heart was still too closed, might always be too closed. But partnership in purpose, in fighting for something bigger than themselves. Okay, I'll do it. Catherine smiled, not the cold CEO smile from the basement, something warmer, more human. Your first assignment. Help me plan a memorial for your wife. Sarah Cole deserves recognition for starting all of this. Her name should be on something permanent. Marcus's throat tightened. What did you have in mind? The new Pediatric Environmental Health Center at Cedar Valley Memorial. The Sarah Cole Center for Children's Health. Fully funded, fully staffed, dedicated to preventing and treating environmental illness in children. It was perfect, so perfect that Marcus had to look away before the tears could fall. She'd like that. She'd say it was too much, but she'd like it. They stood together as the sun set behind Riverside Elementary, watching poison be scraped away, watching the foundation for something better being laid. Isaiah entertained himself by kicking stones along the fence line, oblivious to the significance of this moment. But Marcus understood. This was what legacy looked like. Not monuments to ego, not buildings with your name on them, but real change that protected the vulnerable. Real work that honored the dead by serving the living. Sarah's watch ticked on his wrist, still running slow, still imperfect, still marking time in its own faithful rhythm. Some wounds never fully healed. Some losses you carried forever. Some promises you kept, even when they hurt. But some legacies, the ones built on kindness and sacrifice and refusing to let suffering go unanswered, those legacies could change the world. One child at a time, one choice at a time. One person deciding to do the hard thing because it was right. Marcus touched the watch face gently, felt its steady tick. We did it, Sarah. We protected them. And somewhere, in whatever place existed beyond the reach of grief and time, Marcus believed she knew. Believed she was proud. Believed her love, imperfect, faithful, enduring, would keep ticking forward. Forever.